Hi, welcome to the podcast School of Love, where we want to help you create parent child relationships where you can talk about anything, especially about sex. In this episode, I get to interview Jason Frost. I'm so elated that I got in touch with him and that he shared about his work and a lot about his book, The Glass Between Us. That glass is referring to a glass separating us with so many others. Sometimes we think the glass, which is our cell phone or a tablet or a laptop, sometimes we think it's connecting us, but in reality, this real life personal connection is irreplaceable. And there's so much insight that he shares, and especially about youth, how that can be very detrimental to our youth when they become reliant on that kind of connection. So, what can we do about it as parents? Listen to this episode. He has a lot of tips about how this is not just about governmental organizations changing their ways. That's a big thing. But also about us parents becoming really great mentors for our kids and investing into that connection ourselves. I loved having this conversation, and I hope you enjoy this episode as well. Hi, welcome back to the podcast School of Love. And today I'm here with Jason Frost. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you so much, Amelia, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so I have just gotten in touch with your work, just started reading your book called The Glass Between Us. You have Wired Human. I'm not exactly sure how to describe the project. Can you explain more about it?
That's a great question. Wired Human has a lot of meaning to me in many different ways. My wife and I started out as, worked in education for about a decade. My wife is a teacher, and I work with kids with disabilities and learning behavioral disorders. And we just had a front row seat to seeing what happened back in about 2013 and 14 when smartphones just entered the back pocket of every child, and what kind of carnage that left behind. And it was everything from kids that brought things to commit suicide at school because their nudes went viral, to human trafficking of 14-year-olds, to where pornography was so embedded in school, childhood development, that 11-year-olds were acting out porn scenes in front of the class thinking it was hilarious. And we were just shell-shocked, like so different from the way we grew up, so different from any normal standard that we ever imagined. And we realized that this topic was somehow not just taboo, but really just not acknowledged. Nobody had an idea of where to start, what the language was around it, what research was saying about it. And Mark Zuckerberg back in the day was an absolute hero. So that came to a whole journey of really what Wired Human became, which is a nonprofit organization fighting to protect children's rights in the digital age and work as hard as we can to get youth educated, to be empowered, not only through knowledge and understanding, but also have active roles in decision-making processes around the world and how digital technology is affecting them and how they grow up with it. But also bringing in parents, bringing in schools, and bringing in leaders from around the world to gather together to think or to brainstorm and come up with ideas of how can we do this better for youth, that they have a better shot of developing in the digital age successfully. So Wired Human was born through that process, and it started, like, one of the big main milestones was actually the book, The Glass Between Us. It took us about 4.5 years to research and write, and we did the homework, and we tried to do it through a story-based platform, so the book wouldn't be bone dry. So we told a lot of stories and backed it up with a ton of research. So whoever reads it will have irrefutable research at an academic level of argumentation for why smartphones, why social media, why pornography is something that we need to address today and educate youth on. And so that's really what Wired Human, our nonprofit, stands for. We're based in Nashville, Tennessee. We do most of our work in Washington, D.C., but we're also working in Germany. We have a active youth coalition in Germany working with schools and educating youth here. We just met with over 60 school leaders from across our district who are excited to get our programs and educational resources in their schools. So it's something over the course of about 4 years that has grown really by everybody is affected. Like, it really is that every family, every teacher has a backstory with this, and Wired Human is there to equip them and give them the tools, the knowledge, and the confidence to address this in their local communities and homes.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I think that's so awesome. I have to find like these groups in Germany and get connected. Because fun fact, Jason is also in Germany, in Cuxhaven. You can see from the Fachwerk, it's called Fachwerk, I think,
Yeah.
architecture behind you.
Ah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's really, yeah, just I would love to kind of um, like fan a little bit about your book, which I didn't finish, but The Glass Between Us, I really love even just the beginning because you guys compared this time of the internet age to when automobiles just entered the world and there were no rules, there were no signs, there were no guidelines, and there were so many accidents. And that's what it's like now with the internet or the connection that we have with all of our devices to it. Um, we're just kind of going wild on the internet, and so many accidents are happening. So many people are getting hurt. So many children are getting hurt. So it was just a good analogy for that.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like that analogy actually continues to be so relevant as we see the way the internet is evolving, especially with social media and AI. And those things are very uniquely intertwined with each other. And we can get into that in a second. There's a story. So I was analyzing, really where you start with this is you're like, where's the money coming from? And so you look at social media companies in general, and there was a study that came out. It was published. I think the Harvard Gazette did a public. They didn't do the study themselves, but they published about the article in the study, and it found that. I mean, this is very conservative numbers because that's really like when you do peer-reviewed research, it's hard to come up with concrete, and usually it's a little bit behind. But they're saying $11 billion a year. I mean, $11,000 million bills in your hand is what they're earning. The tech industry, the five largest or biggest social media companies, especially Meta, is earning off of childhood development or earning off of childhood vulnerability, earning off of childhood in general in 1 year. That is an incredible amount of money. And if you look at, we talked about cars, right? The Ford Motor Company. So they're a massive industry where you have hundreds of thousands of employees. You have not just supporting these employees, but also everything that's infrastructured around their cars, selling them to the dealers, the distribution, the truck drivers, the parts. I mean, it supports an entire ecosystem. It's probably one of the healthiest things, the car industry, for an economy, because it provides so many jobs and so many opportunities for others to benefit. They make $174 billion a year in revenue, and they walk away from a profit of about 5.9%. That means they're walking away with something like, I haven't done the math in my head, but it would be like maybe $8 billion, $7 billion, something around those lines. And Meta walks away with something crazy, ridiculous. They make about 162 billion, so a little less than Ford Motor Company. But for a social media company that produces nothing physical, no jobs that are going out through the economy, not all this stuff that's feeding the entire society at large, but they're really producing just ones and zeros at a baseline and selling attention, and especially childhood attention. And their profit margin for out of the 162 they bring in a year, or 164, I think it is. They walk away with about $60 billion in pure profit. I mean, we're talking 10 times the amount of what the Ford Motor Company walks away with. If you want to take the 10 largest manufacturing companies in the U.S. economy, you could take Lockheed Martin, General Motors, 3M, which makes all kinds of products, Raytheon, all these different crazy huge firms that we all know about. That they would have to earn a capacity of about $1 trillion in revenue in order to equal the same amount of profit that Meta brings in 1 year. That's one social media company. So the amount of money and the gold bars that are coming out of this are just ridiculous for the industry. And that's to say that they found the perfect product to sell. They really have, because they don't have to create it like a car. You have to find the parts and source it all. I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of people that need to be involved to make that work. With Meta, they hire AI to do it for them. They replace programmers, and every aspect is automated through AI. Even if your child is abused online and their video goes on social media, guess what? AI is making the decisions, because they're not going to hire a real person to do that, which equates to an obscene amount of profit that they make with this, even though they're causing huge mental health damages in society, that we can't even begin to fathom the billions and billions, if not trillions of dollars of cost that it's taking on in society at large to pay for all this mental health care and the inability of youth to be their full developed selves as previous generations in the smartphone world or the social media world. So looking at the car industry, and this is coming a big roundabout way to go for it, but Ford got in big trouble. I think it was like in the 1970s. I can't remember exactly, but the Ford Pinto, was a really popular car they tried to bring out super fast. Guess what? Tech does the same thing. They bring out their product and they break it on society, they break it on kids, and then try to fix it based on how they think it got broken. Usually on, is it making enough money or not, or is it enjoyable enough, not on safety. But the Ford Motor Company brought out their product, and they found that if somebody got in a fender bender, like at 30 miles an hour, the car would burst into flames. And they did an analysis with lawyers, and they said, what would cost more money? Would it be more money to fix the product, or would it be more money just to pay out, or would it be less money to pay out the lawsuits? Well, they decided it would be less money to pay out the lawsuits. And we're talking whole families burning alive in cars, burning alive kids, burning alive in cars that they were willing to accept as collateral for their product because it was a cheaper way to go, they originally believed. And they got in big trouble for that. And now we have $100 billion in R&D and safety that go into vehicles in the car industry that we have today. We're all the way back in the 1920s with social media, where you have AI that is literally manipulating and addicting kids because you have, think about 1 billion people working full time to predict what content they could put in front of your child's screen that will make them look at that screen a little longer, which equates to more of that $11 billion in profit. So that's the way the AI works. We call it the internet 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. 1.0 is the read-only internet. That was when the universities blew up. They posted their research online, and suddenly Humboldt in Berlin could communicate with Berkeley in California and share research. Then you had Internet 2.0, which was social media. We could now comment on each other's thoughts and ideas. Great, email, all this exchange back and forth. But Internet 3.0 is now the internet that interacts with us. And it does it so subversively and subliminally. It's in the background, taking our data, running it through what Meta brags about on their website, over tens of trillions. This is not an exaggeration. Tens of trillions of parameters. And we use the word parameter, we're talking about little steering wheels that drive the data through different avenues to be able to interpret the data in a probability outcome of the sole purpose is, what is the probability if I put this data or this content in front of you that you will keep looking at your screen a little longer? And if it's sexualized content, if it's only fangirls that are advertising their links and all their stuff to young teenage boys, it identifies everybody's greatest temptations, greatest weaknesses, and greatest vulnerabilities because it equates to maximum profit. So that's what we're battling up against today. It's the new car industry, to say, where you see this massive mental health crisis globally, and this tech industry that has absolutely no accountability, which was a whole nother topic to go into, absolute immunity from lawsuits and all these things that have been built into the structures with their lobbyists. And families and children are paying the price, not just in their mental health, but also with their lives.
Wow. So that's a lot. I mean, trying to follow all of that, but I'm just trying to also think. So, I mean, you said that AI makes a lot of decisions, but these big decisions are made by people, right? Like who are you kind of fighting, or who are you? Because like the awareness that you show, right, that youth are being harmed and so on. Who do you show that to? Who are I don't think it's really government, right? Or
that's everybody. I mean, that's a great question. So you're right. Where do you start? It's oftentimes you have to show what's happening to youth, because there's definitely youth voices are incredibly important. In fact, the single most important part of this entire puzzle because they are the absolute experts on this. In the U.S., there's a study that came out from, I always say her last name right, but from iGen, the book iGen, Jean Twenge, I think is what she's called, but I always say twinge. But she came out with a study along with others that said that youth are spending about 10 hours a day in front of a screen. And so they are the experts. They know it better than all of us. They know exactly what's going on. They know how to feed the algorithm, which is, by the way, grooming them to sexualize themselves and be easy to exploit later. In fact, pedophiles are saying social media did half the work for us because if you're getting rewarded all day long as a 12-year-old girl, if you post a bikini shot of yourself and the algorithm identifies that as profitable content and distributes that across the world versus you post your science fair project and the algorithm throws it in the trash, the algorithmic trash can and you get 0 views. As a teenage girl, I think Gail Dines from Culture Reframe said this, you have two options on the online world. You're either, and I'm not going to use the language she used, but you're either a sexualized object or you're invisible. Mm-hmm. And for a girl, a teenage girl being invisible is just not an option. And so they feed the algorithm and they get groomed to think that their body is the sole source of their value through what this technology is doing. But yeah, so getting back to your original question, we met recently, a couple days ago, and I think I mentioned this before, in front of our school district here in Cuxhaven, in Landkreis Cuxhaven. There were 60 school leaders that came, and we had 4 youth come, 3 from Morocco. Some of them were very diverse groups. Some were born and raised here in Cuxhaven. Some were second generation Moroccan, Muslim. And it was so powerful because they came up and they showed this artwork project that they had worked on where they had created these pieces of art to describe how they were feeling and experiencing things online. And some of them had, just very dramatic, like tears coming out of their eyes that were made of blood. They had one of them put a portrait of themselves but scribbled like all this confusion around their face and then set it on fire to show how they were just feeling like they're burning alive on social media. Another one did a portrait of them of a figure putting a handgun to their head, ready to pull the trigger, and they showed this to all these school principals, all these school leaders across our Landkreis, and told stories. And I thought it was interesting because the girl that it was 4 girls that were a part of our youth coalition, and we didn't have any boys that were available at the time to do this project. And they wanted to represent boys' voices, so they shared a story about a boy that had gotten tricked by another classmate to sharing his nude photo with her. And the minute he sent it to her, she made fun of him, mocked his body, told him about details of his body and his private parts that she just laughed at and said, "I'm going to send this to the whole school." He ended up getting mocked by the whole school to the point where he refused to go back to school anymore because it was too traumatizing. And this school leaders, just hearing this and many other stories they shared and represented, because they were like, we are the ambassadors of our generation. We're going to tell you what's actually happening. And going through all of these pressures that they hold with eating disorders and self-harm and things and depression and anxiety, the school leaders were just completely broken. They were crying and they were shaking as they were trying to move forward with their day, just realizing the trauma that this generation is facing. And then the second thing that we say, what's your response to that? You see the damage, you see what's going on. What's your response? What do you have in your personal sphere of influence that you can bring to the table to be a piece of this puzzle to make this better? And we do that with school leaders. We go to Washington, D.C. and host national gatherings in the Capitol. We've been in multiple times in the White House, speaking with the administration, speaking with their White House task forces, with youth voices, always with youth representing, sharing the truth. And the same question comes at the end. What can you do in your sphere of influence to solve this problem? And we do the same thing with the tech industry. We've had TikTok, Roblox, Apple. We've invited other groups like Meta to come to our gatherings, but we want them to come to the table too and be like, what can you do to solve this problem? So it really is centering the discussion around what truly matters, which is youth and families and parents. These are the centerpiece. This is where it all matters because we all have that at home. We're all moms and dads, aunts and uncles. We all have a contact to kids that we care about deeply, but those kids, 100% of them are struggling with what I just talked about today because they're born and raised in that world.
Yeah, I feel like parents, that's that's also what I wanted to talk to you a bit about because I mean, a lot of these things, as shocking as they are, I'm wondering how much can we as parents, influence that? Like some of it is like technology is victimizing the children, but us parents, we can definitely do something. Whether like there was this film that came out, Adolescence. I
Mm.
didn't actually see it, but I heard some reviews about it, and some of it was really like the point was parents feel like, oh, this is just the culture. I follow it because my kid has to fit in or what for whatever reason. But in the end, you can turn off the internet or you can just say, sorry, no cell phone. It's too dangerous, you know. Yeah. So have you had like lots of conversations with parent groups? Like how does it look like? And yeah,
All the
like
time, all the time.
yeah.
It's actually one of the key groups that we need to talk to. Parents, I mean, oh, there's so many places I could start with this. One, it's just completely unfair what's going on right now. You, as a parent, if you're out there, please do not feel shame. What I have experienced as a professional working with every demographic, social class, cultural, religious background, everybody's experiencing it in very similar ways. And depending on, some parents are really open about it and be like, hey, throw their hands in the air. I don't know what to do. This is what's going on. And other parents come out of like social networks where it's like it would be something shameful to share that, oh my goodness, my kid is addicted to pornography, or oh my goodness, my child got sextorted online, or all these different things. But the reality is, like, I have people come to me that you can't imagine who have like they do everything in their realm and sphere of influence to try to shield their kids from all of the stuff that comes and still have stories that they're experiencing. So I'm not saying it's inevitable, but what I am saying is that you're not alone in this battle, and it's not your fault as a parent. And I think what the tech industry tries to do is blame the parent. They're saying, well, they're the ones that should be controlling the kids' tech use at home. And it's a little bit like this. If the car industry said, you know what, why do we need to put seatbelts or airbags, or why do we need to have engineers that structure the cars to have crash zones? So if you get in a crash, your survivability is 95% or something like that. It's the parents who drive the car. If they don't know how to drive and crash into a pole, that's their problem. And so, yes, we do have driver's licenses and we have to go through training. And I think parents should be educated and have knowledge in this. But there's a huge onus put on the car manufacturer that there needs to be fundamental baselines that give a buffer of safety for accidents and for things to go wrong where it's just not all on the parent. And I mean, a parent alone to figure out all the safety settings on their kids' devices, on social media platforms, everything's always changing. And then plus, these safety settings are very careful not to abridge the profit mechanisms in place by big tech with addicting their kids. So even if you do all the safety settings, that the way the tech industry is profiting off of your kids is still very present in the technology itself. It's designed to be addictive. It's designed to show them content to keep them hooked and keep them coming back. And so it still doesn't fully solve the problem. So really what we talk with parents is a highly relational way of approaching this. I think a lot of parents, especially my generation, we came out of a very, growing up in the Midwest US in a Baptist church environment, I had a lot of sort of classical ways I was raised, which I actually am really happy about at some level. But it was a lot no nonsense, do it because I said so. And sort of boundaries were set as the first line of defense and be like, here's the rules, don't break them or else. And all my friends and everybody lived under don't break them or else. And we were all on the same page together. Back when kids used to get spanked in school and all these different things, it was just a very different way of doing it. Fortunately, or unfortunately, both in the same, we don't have that doesn't work with technology because the autonomy that a child has in the way they can do everything in secret in their own invisible world to themselves and each other removes the ability for parents to put those same types of boundaries on in a same type effective way. Because one, when the boundaries are stepped over, the parent is clueless about it until something happens that involves the FBI and police, or something going really bad, which happens all the time. So we have to start at a different place. And here's the thing, I think it's actually requiring us to step up to a higher level of parenting on our end, but it also requires youth to step up to a higher level of maturity on their end. So I think we have an invitation here as parents to actually raise the bar and meet this battle at the front line together and succeed by producing higher level parenting and absolute amazing self-determined, confident kids, because that's what it's going to take. So we break that down into something that, and I mean, you can read about it in the book, The Glass Between Us, which is on Amazon. Just type in Jason and Lisa Frost, Glass Between Us, you'll find it there. But the gist of it is we broke it down into a model called RUM. It's a terrible acronym, I admit it, but it's a RUMB. And you're like, where in the world did the B come from? It's a old 16th century navigation term to help chart straight lines in the ocean for sailors. So it felt kind of like it fit because it's navigating parenting. It's just a very outdated term, but relationship stands for R, understanding is U, mentorship is M, and boundaries is B. So you notice that boundaries come at the end. So what we're really asking parents to do, based on our experience working, over a decade with youth, is that you need to start with relationship first. That command control, do it because I said so, doesn't work anymore in the digital age, because there needs to be why. Why am I doing it this way? Because everything in the digital world, the current is pulling me in the opposite direction of where you're telling me to go. So it starts with building that relationship foundation. And really what that says is what matters to you is important to me. And what's important to you really matters to me. If you want to build a relationship with a teenager that doesn't want to have anything to do with you, but loves cars, take them to a local car dealership and go test drive some super awesome sports car, and in Germany, go out on the Autobahn and see how fast it goes. And then after that, take them to their favorite Dönerladen or McDonald's and have a conversation about life. And I think you'll find that you're going to be having way more amazing conversations with your teen based on that baseline than just sitting down awkwardly and being like, so how was school today? It's like, they're just like, it was fine, or give you the standard, whatever. Understanding is a little counterintuitive. So we're on our way to boundaries, right? So understanding, you would think, oh, I need to know everything about tech and I need to read Jason and Lisa's book. And it's actually, no, it's understanding why your child is using the tech and engaged in it in the way they are. Because I think there's fundamental needs that they're trying to reach and trying to meet. They just don't know they're getting it in the wrong way. The best way to describe it is your child is starving for certain fundamental things. They want to feel purpose. They're so hungry, and they're born into a school environment and a world that makes them completely purposeless. They're like wards of the state almost. They have to go and do this stuff because we told them to go do it. And they're on the conveyor belt through, and it's very difficult for them to experience purpose in life. It's very difficult for them to feel significant. It's very difficult for them to feel heard and seen and known. These are all fundamental needs that Mark Zuckerberg has spent billions of dollars hiring the top level psychologists. By the way, if you want to apply for a job for him, you have to be a master's degree in programming and psychology. Isn't that interesting that they don't just take one or the other? They want the package combined, because they're all about being the tool that kids use to meet their fundamental human needs. So parents can come in, and then rather than ripping the video game system off the wall and throwing it in the closet, you could say, what is this game to you that makes it so important? And then you might realize they're a level 98 and they're super popular and they have friends on there and people look up to them and want to understand how they can play as good as they do. So they ask them questions and they get to have the purpose, the significance, they're seen and known. So what it comes into a conversation is, how do we create that in your everyday life? Like, how do we build that into your structure of life? Is it sports that we can help you get involved in? Is it making our family the community hangout spot? Do we need to buy a above ground swimming pool that everybody in the summertime hangs out at our place? Like, what are the things that are missing in our environment that aren't feeding you? And the other thing is, really with that technology, it's asking what's the value proposition. When you go to a buffet to fill your hunger and your thirst, but the buffet is just giving you holograms, so you feel like you're eating and you're eating and you're eating and you're like, oh my goodness, this is so great, but all as it is just air. You're just empty and getting empty and more hungry. And then you hang out with a real relationship and maybe do what I just described with your son, take him to the car dealer, and you actually walk away with something that was put inside their heart that's sustainable. If you build those two things in well, then you come to mentorship. And that's when you have permission to speak into your teenager's life. That's where you've proved the I care. You have built the understanding that they're not stupid for looking at pornography or some freak, but they're doing it because they have a fundamental healthy sex drive that desires real intimacy, and it got hijacked by an industry that knows that and manipulated. So you have conversations that remove shame, say it's not your fault. Let's find a better way to experience and have a goal for amazing sex one day in the right context, in the right relationship. You're removing those things and barriers. You're helping them feel seen and known, and then you come into mentorship, and then they're ready to listen. What are your ideas? And really, mentorship is this. How can we put tools in your life, and those are maybe called boundaries, that say yes to what you want in your life? So what do you want to be when you grow up? Where do you feel your most purpose? What really gets you excited about life? And how can we put things in there, we'll call them boundaries, that say yes to you achieving those goals? And so boundaries start to look more like something that supports me and helps me and is my yes in life versus something that is a rule that's just made to be broken or for me to wrestle up against or rebel against. So that's the RUM model. We apply that to over 10 chapters in our book, covering everything from neuropsychology and neurological development of adolescents to the whole social media theme, to human rights and children's rights and parental rights law. It goes across the whole board. We're always putting RUM into those things. So that's probably the best takeaway a parent could have by reading that book, is really understanding how RUM applies across the board in parenting and the digital age.
Yeah, thanks so much for explaining that, Jason. I really loved RUM when I first read through the explanation. It just makes so much sense, even the order of it, when you're really trying to help your kids in some way. And yeah, I was also thinking, like, it starts with with relationship, and that's really what youth or people generally are searching for in social media or online, is this connection.
Yeah.
And they're replacing it very often. And I feel like I love also that you said, like, we need to level up as parents. You know, we need to really provide that connection as much as we can, I guess, yeah, in our own relationship with our kids, but also try to nourish, good friendships, like you said, get a pool, get people to hang out, for example. So they don't need to replace that kind of connection in other ways.
Technology is a tough competitor. It really is, because it's synthesized dopamine reward. I mean, this is 101, and I know I'm just preaching probably to everybody that knows about this now, but it really is a dopamine injector that you're competing against. And that's the problem with drugs, is it gives you an experience and a euphoric feeling for nothing. Nothing, you walk away with nothing but poor health and bad mental health and all kinds of other problems, loss of job. And social media is doing something very similar. It's tricking the brain into thinking that it's having a meaningful experience that kids walk away with and feel like they just have a black hole sitting there. And that black hole is filled with all the garbage that tech leaves behind, the pornography. Social media is just a gateway to pornography because the algorithm is set up that way. And the thing is like, there's something about social media when you get on and it's deciding for you what to look at, that you don't feel the responsibility yourself. Like, I didn't tell it to put that in front of my face. It's just in front of my face. But really the way it works is that it read your entire digital footprint and watched the pupils of your eyes dilate and watched how you paused for 2.5 seconds on a bikini model doing something, and then decided to synthesize every sexualized piece of content around that to give you 500 more pieces of that content until your whole social media experience on Instagram looks like a sexualized pornographic experience. And parents are on there looking, at knitting and sports and thinking, oh, social media is totally cool. I mean, I use it and I don't get that stuff. But that's not the way it works. It exploits your greatest temptations. And one of the things I talk about even with school leaders is they come to me and they don't tell me about their, well, first, they usually don't tell me about their school, like the kids in their school. They tell me about their own kids. And even when they're really honest and awesome, they come and say, hey, this is my problem. I'm 45 years old and I struggle with this stuff every single day on my smartphone because it figured out that I'm a male, that I enjoy sexual pleasure, and that I pause for the 2.5 seconds on a bikini model, and now my whole feed is garbage. And so it's like we're not immune to it ourselves. It's just an highly exploitive, intelligent environment that's scalable that we're all confronted with on a regular basis. So we're in this together. We really are. Our kids, I mean, we could relate to our kids if we would pause and be honest with them about our own struggles. I mean, I will tell my son when he's 8 years old, my oldest son, I have 3 kids, I'm going to first give myself as the best example of my struggles with social media, where sexualized content came after me and how I had to battle through those things and make sure I was putting up the walls around me. But it's a battlefield, and I've been shot and knocked down and had to put all kinds of things around me to support myself, to make good choices. And I want to make sure that I'm the first example to him of what a warrior online looks like. So he'll never feel shame or feel like he's experiencing a unique taboo experience unto himself.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to also ask how do we navigate that? Because like you said, we're all kind of vulnerable. And in your book, you also mention a really nice German, he was an assistant teacher from Bruderhof, I think you said.
Yeah.
He completely cut off technology. So yeah, is this the only way, or how do you find a balance? Because yeah, we are examples as parents. Do we have to all live in this kind of Bruderhof environment, or is there a way to somehow live peacefully?
Oh, well, for the tech industry, it's $1 trillion question, and that's not an exaggeration. And so they'll tell you their goal is to pacify you and get you to be in a state of catatonic state of just consumption and unmotivated to do anything else. And so that's their biggest profit margin, is their entire system is designed to debilitate you to the point where you just sit in front of your screen, and they're most happy about that. So that's what we're facing. So the question is, how do we navigate a platform? And this is where parents all know about predators.
Yes.
Sorry. How do we navigate predators online is such a classic thing that's so important because it's so prevalent, and it's like hundreds of thousands of open cases, not exaggeration, with police around the world of predators that have done horrible things to kids online. So it's something we take very seriously. But one of the things that gets overlooked in that is we don't actually acknowledge that the platform itself is built to be a predator. It does the exact same thing a predator does. And here's a little bit what a predator does is they lure somebody into a type of relationship where they advertise something that they're going to get out of it that's beneficial, but really what they have in mind is they're going to get something out of them at the cost of their well-being and health, with sometimes such severe damages it can even take that person's life or debilitate them for the rest of their lives. That's a predator, heartless, evil people. You have then the social media platform that essentially is promising, what do they say? Hey, we're where friends are. We're Facebook, come and meet friends, come and get connected, be part of the community. So you go into this thinking the value proposition is I'm going to be part of a community, I'm going to be seen, I'm going to be known, I'm going to have purpose. And really what they're doing is they're exploiting you and leaving you with a whole plethora of mental health problems and exposure to inappropriate content and addiction and all these different things, and they don't care. And so the actual platforms themselves are predatorial. And so I ask the question to parents when you think about this. So here's this platform exposing your kids to pornography, connecting them to sexual predators, addicting them, and all these negative things. Would you allow your child to go to school if you knew that the class teacher was a sexual predator? Would you allow your child to go on a trip to, anywhere overnight if you knew that one of the chaperones that was with the class was an actual sexual predator, or any type of predator? But yet we give our kids smartphones and send them upstairs to their rooms and put them in the most dangerous neighborhood, which is alone at home with their screen. And so, I get on Capitol Hill and I could scream till I'm blue in the face because I'm watching a generation die. And I'm with hundreds of parents in a room at times in Senate hearings, that kids that have chosen to opt out of life because the pain was too great. And social media companies that make billions of that and are completely immune from any responsibility. So that's one side of it. But as a parent, I think we really have to take a hard look at social media and ask the question, is there a value proposition in that at all? Is there something that my kid or I can justify that's actually giving you something in return that's valuable and in comparison to the risk that they're overcoming? So in my mind with my kids, I don't see the value proposition there. I don't walk away ever using social media and thinking, wow, I feel better about myself. I feel more clarity about what I want to do in life. With the caveat that if you're doing how-to videos on YouTube with purpose-driven social media and things like that, yes, it can be a tool. But when it comes to news feeds and scrolling and social comparison and all that stuff, it's a total train wreck. And so there is like this category of purpose-driven use that would be another conversation for maybe another time. But the broad, so give my kid a smartphone and put them on social media because there's benefits and they'll talk to their friends and stuff, is smoke and mirrors. It's not real. That's not what they're getting out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Just one quote I read right before I came on in your book, I think it was from a senator in Nebraska or something. It was, how do we awaken an aspiration to self-disciplined independence when the neighbor's kids almost all are suffering from the same affluenza? So that's also something that our kids are competing with or battling, is just, they feel left out if they don't join this big crowd of kids using smartphones. Yeah. So, I tried to hold off on giving my daughter a smartphone as long as I could, but we gave in the end because, just she felt like so lonely. Lonely as in, the last one without a smartphone in her class. And so
that would make sense, because the smartphone, there's texting, there's WhatsApp, there's apps that, that we use to keep track of our sports events and stuff. Like in German club system, you're all on an app that, you make your payments to the app, you connect with the other players and organize trainings. That's just one of many examples where it's a necessary tool. I use WhatsApp and all this different stuff. Our youth coalition, we have groups to connect and communicate, and we use smartphones all the time. And I think it's coming back to that value proposition and that purpose-driven position. I think the smartphone is a great tool, and I think that's another thing is I don't believe that absolute, don't give our kids any technology until they leave the house is a really bad idea, because they will never learn in a safe environment. So I think giving your daughter a smartphone, I don't know how old she is, but that's definitely a place for that. And I think before our kids go to college, they need to have experience. They need to have made mistakes. They need to have had the opportunity to grow and learn and be mature in how they interact with these devices with us. Just understanding that the world they're in is completely broken, and we're at the era of the auto industry where there's no airbags, safety features, street lights, rules, driver's licenses. This was Detroit in the 1920s, and the auto industry was 96% more dangerous than it is today back then. And that's exactly what the internet is today. Hopefully we'll get to a mature place where it works for us in a better way, where we protect our fundamental freedoms and don't let tech companies exploit the hell out of our kids and our family. But until that day comes, we have to take a sobering look at what the value proposition is and what purposes we're using these technologies for, and training our kids to do the same.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I just lost my thought, but
You're good.
yeah, my daughter, like, so yeah, I had a conversation with some parents recently, and that was also a point that came out, is that, we can't also just completely deprive them of technology the way it's developing today. Like if one friend was saying in high school, he had someone in his class who had no idea what email was. And then, they were saying like, just send it to me by email. And then he's like, yeah, I put an email in Google, but nothing happened. And then, it's just like, if you're totally cut off from all of that, you can easily, lose a lot in this world today. And I can imagine also with AI developing, like if you have no idea how it works, no idea how to distinguish an AI picture from a normal one, although that's also getting really tough.
Yeah.
But if you don't know that it's even out there, then you can easily suffer as well. So we were just talking in a group of parents, like we do feel like our kids should have contact with technology, but that's why I really like RUMB as a guideline, that this mentorship is so important, and also understanding like why our kids want this or that.
It's the difference between, like, if let's say there's an all-out war going on, do you want to train your kid to hide in the basement and hopefully never, be exposed to the world, or do you want to train them to be an absolute warrior with a whole bunch of tools, and a leader, and somebody who's out there knowing how to navigate and knowing how to do this? I think it's a lot safer than a child that's hiding from the battle around them, or shielded by the parents, and only to be, the minute they get pushed out the inevitable door, they're just going to get swept away. Like, not a chance. And so I completely agree with you. I think within that, there's things like wait till eighth, like, that I really believe in, of don't give social media to kids before eighth grade. I think that's just like a fundamental, like, hard liner that I think parents should really band together on. The other thing I was going to say is, if you have not, like, we all know what it's like to be thirsty. I mean, especially me, because I lived in America and grew up, and we used to do these road trips for, like, that would be days. I mean, like, Germans would never understand this, but driving from Washington, D.C. to Southern California with moving trucks and everything took up to 8 days for us to do it, with like all, like, family of 7, our pets and everything. And I just remember being stuck in the back of a hot car and no chance of getting water, and being so thirsty, and being like, can we pull over somewhere, and I just need a drink. And just with the way things work, you had to wait. And then you get that drink of water, and I mean, it's like your body is telling you that it's worth a gold bar. Like, you're just so grateful for it. You're just loving it. You're sipping every savory bit of it. And I think a little bit with what social media is, especially with kids that have been inundated by it, and what I've experienced in our youth coalition, is they're so starving. They're so hungry. They're so thirsty. Like, it doesn't fulfill anything. It just makes them feel drier and more depleted. And I think if parents, the best thing we could do is give them a drink of real water. And that doesn't mean forcing them to do what we want to do, but it's really looking at our environment around us and being like, do we have an environment that's giving them real water? Is this the hangout place for the neighborhood to come over? Like, we live in the US and even in Germany, and these really, like, come home, connect to your Wi-Fi, park your car in your garage, and never talk to your neighbor's environment. Like, our society is incredibly toxic when it comes to relationships in general, the way we live together. And so people are naturally pushed towards something that alleviates that loneliness and alleviates that pain. And so I think if we create an environment, it could be something as simple as, like, what if we had all your friends over once a week, and we'll buy food and we'll put it out. You guys can play, do whatever you want. The house is yours once a week. But the deal is you all have to leave your phones at the front of the door. And my parents used to do that when I was a kid, not with smartphones, but they would literally spend hundreds of dollars. They worked in ministry. They didn't have money, but they spent hundreds of dollars a week and invited 2 kids or 3 kids to my house every week that I wanted to have over. And it became so enticing that we had over 50 kids coming once a week by the end of it, that were dying and so thirsty and so hungry to experience community and real, that we had kids running away from home that were trying to figure out to get to our house, to move in with us, because it was something that was so attracted to them. They were desperate. And so I'm like, if we could recreate that. And what my dad is, he fired up the grill. They cooked amazing food, and it was all you can eat until you could burst. I mean, these are teenagers. They had to buy 50 pounds of meat and all this stuff, and they made that their investment. That was like, every week we're going to do this for you guys because we want this place to be a healthy environment of community, because we know that the benefits are there. So that instilled in me, and also created a challenge where I want my kids to experience that similar thing. It means I can't do all the things I want to do. I financially can't do all the things I want to have, because I'm willing to invest in that world to give my kids real water. And I think if we, and the last thing, sorry, I'm rambling here, but realize you'll be the only one that's going to do that. And that's the reality. You will be the only one in your friend group probably going to be consistently, because nobody knows how to do this. They just don't. So if you stop doing it, they'll just not know what to do and stay at home. So you have to be willing to be a pioneer in this and be willing to be the only one serving. Now, that doesn't mean you can't ask for support and, everybody pitch into a pot or something, but the organizer and the responsibility, somebody has to take the lead on that. And so those of you listening, you should ask yourselves, is that something you could take on? Because I think out of everything I've described today, this is probably the most fundamental and most important piece that parents could do right now, is build that environment around their kids, and let it start with just one friend and see where it goes. Maybe, it could be 50 friends in a year to come. Maybe that's not what you want, but be very beneficial for your kids. Very beneficial for your kids.
Yeah, amen to that. I love the idea, and also what your parents provided sounds amazing. What keeps coming to mind is we were at the beach recently. It's been really hot in Germany, at a lake, and there was this boy who was maybe 5 years old, and I was there with my nieces and my kids, and my niece, she's already almost 17. She's actually really good with social, with phones and everything. And she noticed this little boy was hiding under a towel on TikTok. And we were just kind of thinking how sad that is. And then I looked at the parents, and the parents were there pretty much smoking their cigarette. And, it's kind of okay, why did you guys come to the beach?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just I have to say, in the early times of my own parenting, I also often gave my kids a smartphone when times were stressful. And I've learned over time how that is, it just doesn't belong in the hand of such a young child. So, yeah, I don't know, I think an awareness is lacking for many parents of just what's happening, what we're actually doing when we give our kids these devices. And yeah, I mean, it's the lack of knowing what the kids are seeing and what they're consuming. The predators are there online. But then also just this whole gesture, I can't play with you, or I can't be with you, so I'm going to give you a phone, even though we're physically present. Mentally, I am just incapable of being present with you right now, and so I give you a phone. So, yeah, I feel like in Germany it's getting better. Even the doctors, they'll say, yeah, no screen time till 3 at least, minimum.
Yeah.
And yeah, maximum 45 minutes a day or things like that. But this awareness is lacking in many places. Like, I don't know if all doctors say that across the globe, you know?
Yeah. Well, I've talked to doctors. We just had one, um, Dr. Gupta, that came to our DC roundtable a couple months ago. And she reported that she has kids that are getting bed sores because they've been laying on couches so long on their smartphone after school that they lost circulation in their body and their skin died on their back.
Oh my gosh.
So
Yeah.
like doctors, I think they're like, they get the brunt of it, whether it's mental health crises or kids coming with parents, that are just completely out of control when their phone got taken away. And she attributes a lot of it to dopamine dysregulation. And so, especially when your kids have so what the smartphone is really doing, and again, this is another podcast because we get into the brain neurology for another hour, but when your brain gets a high dose of dopamine, it's basically a learning neurochemical in the brain that tells the brain, one, to send a construction crew to immediately solidify a steel cable in the brain between whatever you did and that dopamine reward, because it wants you to do it again, because it's structured in life. Let's say you found a food source or you did something that was productive and got rewarded for it. It's designed to remember behaviors so you can recreate them. And so in the context of like a smartphone, or let's put it in this way, in a sex and a marriage, like if you are a guy and you want to have a healthy, amazing sexual relationship with your spouse, you have to work hard as a man to be a good man. Like you can't be a doofus, idiot, lazy bum on a couch and expect things to go well in your sex life. But if you're a hard worker, capable, kind, emotionally in tune person, you learn all those things lead to a great dopamine reward. It's an amazing thing that nature does to make us good people by rewarding us and coaxing us along the way. Problem is when smartphones take over that process, one is when you get an influx of dopamine that's too much, your brain is designed to balance itself out. And so the dopamine receptors shut themselves down to become less sensitive to the dopamine reward. That also drives you further into a task and behavior to become excellent at it. Like with sports, scoring 10 points in a game doesn't become as exciting and you push yourself to score 20. So it's also can be helpful, but in the context of a smartphone, what you're really doing is you're shutting down your ability to experience dopamine in all other aspects of your life. So everything becomes black and white, gray, bland, tasteless. Relationships, sex, everything else becomes completely meaningless outside of this hyper dopamine reaction you're getting. And that's especially why sex online is so dangerous, is that you have hundreds of thousands of men reporting erectile dysfunction because they can't have a sexual response to a physical partner anymore because they overdid the dopamine through pornography. The brain learned that a laptop was their sexual partner and put a steel cable between that. And all that becoming a good man thing went out the window, and they cabled their brain to behaviors that are selfish, self-centered, and devious. And so, and not to say that the men are doing it are devious, because the worst part is you get a 11, 12-year-old boy that watches porn, the brain rewards them with the dopamine reward for seeing some horrible, violent act that is the sum of what the market value of pornography is for a 45, 50-year-old man that's been addicted for 30 years. That's what his dopamine receptor is asking for, and that's the first thing your 11, 12-year-old boy is going to see online. So again, could get into this for a whole other like thing about identity and how that's destroyed. Young boys are seeing violence and perversion in context of sex and thinking, I feel good for seeing something like that. I must be a horrible person. Okay, that's my baseline of identity for the next 20 years of my life. So why wouldn't I just become a porn addict and just give up on relationships? So again, that's another podcast, but these are the things when you start getting into the dopamine research and realizing how social media and all of that stuff is affecting your child's ability to experience any form of meaning, pleasure, and joy and wonder. Let's just like wonder. The essence of childhood is wonder. And that being robbed from a child is one of the greatest injustices I think that has happened to this generation, is stealing a child's wonder for the world. So yeah, I'll cap it at that. But I think if we can see it in that context, we know a little bit better what we're fighting for when we're not giving our kids a smartphone, when we're choosing to see it in a purpose-driven light and not just putting them on social media into that addictive dopamine producing delivery system that they have turned into a multi-billion-dollar childhood sale online.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that so eloquently and sharing your knowledge on it. I really appreciate that for the sake of all of us parents. I feel like we could talk about so many things, but I already took an hour of your time.
Oh, we could do Joe Rogan. We'll just go for 3 hours. But then we got to talk about MMA and all kinds of random stuff and my bicycle downstairs and go in circles a few times. But we could do that next time.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to get into some other things another time. Like, I mean, just this whole dopamine idea. Like, also, if when you use an app to learn, is that okay? But tune in next time, everybody. Yeah, thank you so much, Jason. I really enjoyed this talk, and yeah, you really illustrated a lot of important points for us all to think about. So
yeah, well, thank you. And one thing I'd like to end is not just plug my own book, but I'd like to plug Arthur Brooks. I heard him speak recently. This is totally off the cuff, but he talks about what real happiness is. And this guy comes from Harvard University. He's just a brilliant man on understanding all of these things way better than I do when it comes to dopamine. And his stuff, he basically said that the less desires and wants you have in life, the happier you are. And when you look at social media, all that it does is just put all the things in our life that we don't have and just makes us so unhappy, So I think if we zone in on the right things as a family and go through that hard process of focusing in on what really matters and what the value proposition is, and walking with our kids. I mean, my son's 8 years old and talks all the time about why smartphones are this way or that way and how we should be careful. And he actually calls me out. He's like, Dad, why are you on your smartphone again? You know it's bad for you. And I'm like, oh, shoot. But anyways, thank you so much for having me on your show. And I hope it was beneficial and helpful to your audience. And if you want to reach out to me, anybody listening to this, feel free to email me at jason@wiredhuman.org. It's just my first name @wiredhuman.org. Check out our book on Amazon. And you can also look up our website as wiredhuman.org. And there's a couple things I just want to say about that really quick. One is if you have youth that are interested, we have a youth coalition. We're developing things. If you're interested in starting a youth coalition, this is one of our purpose-driven ways that we feel like youth can get off of technology is giving them purpose-driven things to do in a field that they're experts in. So we have a whole pathway of leadership training that we do. We work with parents, but you can find it all on the website, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Yeah, please do. That sounds like a really good resource. Yeah, I know there's also lots more at wiredhuman.org, so please check it out. And thank you so much, Jason. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Spread the word and stay connected through YouTube, Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, and our newsletter, which you can subscribe to on our website, schooloflove.org. Really hope to hear from you.